Hello everyone, and I welcome you again to COE. So today's episode, I am going to talk about decision-making processes. So starting up this channel, I really didn't know where I was going to go with this. But I decided that I should talk about decision making. And I remember learning in a training program once the concept of the OODA loop. I'll say that again, the OODA loop. So it's basically a four-part process of making decisions or acting on, changing environments and experiences. And what it stands for is or observe, orient, decide, and act. So it's basically like a looping cycle. And it starts with you observing a situation, taking in as much information and data as you can, and just trying to get in your brain all the details, as much details as possible as to what your situation is you know presented to you. The second part is to orient yourself. So this process is to understand where you are mentally, understand the resources you have at your disposal to you know help navigate or to deal with the situation at hand. So, you want to be able to know what direction you want to go. You don't want to be lost and, be in the proverbial wilderness, not being able to make sense of the situation. So you want to take time to orient yourself and, lead yourself into the next step, which is to decide. So you're going to make a decision on the next stage of dealing with this situation and overcoming it in the best way possible. And when you are finished making your decision and you decide, you act on that decision. And that obviously will come with consequences if you made the right decision. And, acting is something you want to get done as quickly as possible because you don't want to be stuck in a decision making process where the situation is not resolved. So, in observation, you want to observe things as objectively as possible with a very clear mindset and dealing with things from a perspective of logic and reason and not too heavily based in emotion, because we get blinded by emotions. We're either too sad, too depressed, too angry, too whatever, and it will obscure our ability to process things in a reasonable way and make consciously better decisions. And one thing that I realize has worked for me is to just take a deep breath, observe my breath for a little bit if it's a confrontational situation, and just taking the information with a very clear head, right? The second thing, in dealing with orientation, you have to understand, like, coming across a traumatic situation, whilst you're in the process of dealing with it, it's basically for you to, at this stage, identify what is your stronghold, so to speak. What is your basis, your foundation for, pivoting or making a next form of action. So you need to know how far people are away from you. If it's, a violent confrontation, you need to be aware of, if it's just verbal communication, know that, all right, the person is speaking a particular rhetoric and you don't want to aggravate. So orienting yourself to these things will help you better, inform your decision making process as to how to move forward. Now, when you look at deciding what to do, now, decision could come in two forms. Decision could come in a long-term basis or in a short-term basis, in the sense that, you're either agile like a fox or you're kind of hunched up like a hedgehog and deciding to, have all your hair stand and protect yourself. Now, one particular tool that I have used is the SWOT analysis tool, which is to identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats of a particular situation. Deciding if I make this choice, the strength of that or the advantage that will be given to me if I act in a particular way, or the weakness of me acting or not responding in a particular way, and the opportunities that it can provide, and the possible threats that my decision or what I decide to do can create. Now, when you have finished doing this, deciding process, this will take up the longest part of the OODA loop. But when you have made your decision, sometimes it's good to make a conscious decision if you're with a group that you're going to abide by this. If it's, this decision is lawful, if it is, ethical, and if it's necessary. But when you make that action, you want to make sure that you are sure about that act. And it could be for very bad situations, and it could just be for simple everyday situations. But when you act, you want to make sure you have a sense of conviction, because a lot of times when we don't commit to doing things, it causes even more problems because we have expended some resources and mental effort to get things done. And, when they're just stagnated and they're midway in the process of acting, you tend to open up a whole new dynamic of vulnerabilities, of people taking advantage of the situation to your detriment and to the detriment of people around you. And it could even dig a deeper hole, so to speak, for you to be in, dealing with that situation. So, you know when you have to act, make sure you have as many cards stacked in your favor. But, things would not, get any better. You just get better at dealing with things. So it's something to keep in the back of your mind. So going forward, like, if you have a family member that gets in a car accident while you're in the car, you want to observe the situation, knowing, all right, who is injured? Are you injured? Should you see about yourself first? Taking in as much information as possible, realizing, where threats are going to occur from within the damaged vehicle. You want to orient yourself and, pat yourself down, make sure you don't have any life-threatening injuries. You don't want to go and start attending to somebody and you're dying because you might do a sloppy job of helping them, when you could, patch yourself up and help yourself. And then you want to make, a proper decision. You kind of create like a triage effect of just you and that person in the car. And when you decide, you want to act quickly, because as time goes on, things could start to deteriorate. And this is just one scenario. You can apply this principle in almost every scenario that, you'll come across, if you have the time to think. Sometimes all of this OODA loop could happen just like that. You may not be able to think as quickly, but if you get into the practice of it when it's less stressful over time, you consciously make a decision to, understand what stage of that loop and that process you're in, you're better able to, make better decisions, and inevitably, see your way out of the circumstance. So this concludes this episode, and I thank you for joining me. And like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Let people know what this channel is about, and yeah, I'll talk to you in the next one.